Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was in China this week, meeting with Xi Jinping, giving journalists plenty of vision to beam into Australian households.
21,000 kilometres.
Chilling. It's so cool.
Like you can see, just like 1.5 meters, but they have good smelling hair right now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Welcome today. Thank you so much.
Your Excellencies and honourable guests, 现在开始合影。
Well, everything seems quite friendly now, but during Xi Jinping's reign, his country hasn't exactly been kind to our nation. After we tried to investigate the origins of COVID, you know, that virus which killed several million people and plunged the world into economic crisis, well, his state media boss said Australia is the gum stuck to the bottom of China's shoe. We are useful to China until we are not. And I feel that many in Labor and the media do not understand this. Open discourse with a belligerent superpower is essential, but the degree of pageantry we saw will be chopped up by Xi's state media and used as propaganda. And for those journalists in Australia who think this is all wonderful, spare a thought for those Australians currently rotting in Chinese prisons. A true ally wouldn't do that, and a true Australian leader would see through the ruse of a charm offensive. Well, joining me this week on the panel is Sky News host Caroline DeRusso and contributor James Bolt here on the desk. James, what did you make about the scenes that we saw in China?
I think you nailed it. It's just the pageantry of the whole process for a country that has done so much to undermine Australia, undermine our politicians, but to then turn and go, oh, I'm posing with pandas, I'm getting along with everyone, everything's fine. And then to come back to Australia, as he does today, with no actual commitment, no announcement, nothing that's really helped Australia apart from the photo opportunities. It's bizarre. I think you're right in saying that this is a country that does not have Australia's best interests at heart. It's not, we don't have a lot of shared historical values. We don't share the same belief about liberal democracy and peace in the region. We do with the US, but for some reason, we don't want to meet with Trump. We'd rather meet with Xi Jinping 4 times.
I mean, Caroline, that last point that James just made is probably the most fundamental and telling point. His relationship with Xi Jinping does appear to be on better ground than with Donald Trump, the leader of our greatest ally. What do you make of all this?
I've actually found it really quite amusing, and that's absolutely true. I mean, it's yet another visit to China, and like James said, on no particular business. Like, he was over there on provincial, tourism commissioner type business, as opposed to what you would expect the leader of the country to be doing. But I think too, as far as some parts of Labor and the media are concerned, this is really the paradox of Trump, or the flip side of that coin, right? And what they see as their enemy, which is Trump, well, then my enemy's enemy is my friend. And I think that's why they've been very, very kind about this trip to China, even though it has just been total fluff. Like, absolutely nothing of substance has gone on. And it's simply because they don't like Trump, and this is just one example. But the progressive media, they will get into bed with whichever tin pot dictatorship is an adversary to the US, because they think that somehow that there is the values position, or that there is the righteous position because they're opposing US hegemony or whatever kind of rubbish. So I think you're just seeing that very juvenile university politics, university media, unfortunately play out on Australia's main stage.
Yeah, well said. Well, moving on, China has been lobbying our communications minister, Annika Wells, through its social media company TikTok. But in typical Labor fashion, the conversations have been kept secret. SkyNews.com.au has been investigating the lobbying efforts of China, which wants YouTube to be banned for kids. Now, think about that for a minute. If Labor moves to ban YouTube after previously promising Australians that it was exempt, then we will have made a restrictive and damaging decision in line with what China has been demanding. Now, Labor won't tell us who from TikTok met them or what was discussed, but what we do know is one of TikTok's biggest issues with the social media ban is YouTube's exemption. All eyes are on the Minister, Minister Wells, to see if she listens to TikTok and ignores the overwhelming number of Australians who want a free and open access to the internet. Well, James, the ball is now in the court of the Minister, and it'll be really interesting to see what she does. All of my sources do tell me that she is inclined to actually she's going to go ahead and probably ban YouTube for kids, despite all the glaring issues that we've been reporting on, that your team's been reporting on the website as well. I think that this ties into the last issue. We appear to be allowing a very problematic superpower to have a sympathetic ear, and for whatever reason, they seem to be getting what they want.
Yeah, it's to our point. All right, China is not a country that has Australia's best interest at heart. It's certainly not a country that has the best interest of Australian teenagers at heart. So if TikTok, with all of its links to the CCP, want YouTube to not have an exemption, the problem, it's not motivated by a sense of rightfulness for teenagers. It's barely even motivated by a sense of profit, because you think TikTok is so backed by the Chinese Communist Party, they don't really worry about profit margins in Australia. So what is TikTok's reason for wanting YouTube banned? And because China is such a belligerent nation, and because China has all these long history of wanting to undermine Australia, why should we listen to them? Our default position should be whatever China advises on issues such as this, we should do the exact opposite. Not go, oh, sounds like that's a reasonable point. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I mean, the other aspect of this is, you're taking meetings. Annika Wells' office, and she wasn't at the meeting, I think it's important to say, but they described it as an introductory meeting. Very strange to be taking an introductory meeting from a company which is banned from government devices, is such a national security risk that Senate inquiries have found that, that there's foreign interference aspects here. You cannot even have this app on a government device because of the risk. But we're going to treat you as a legitimate stakeholder and hear what you have to say and have these nice introductory meetings. I have a problem with that.
Well, if those allegations are true, then they covered an awful lot of ground for an introductory meeting, for starters. So there's the first kind of alarm bell. And look, on something like this and on any piece of government policy, all range of stakeholders are going to have a view, right? But the government needs to be very, very careful about what it does here, because as all of us know, YouTube actually has a lot of educational benefits to it, which perhaps many of the other social media platforms don't necessarily have, regardless of where you sit on the ban itself. But this is like everything the government does. And it's not just this government, it's just governments in general and at all levels. If you want to solve a problem that you perceive to be a problem, or it is a problem or whatever, just solve the problem. Don't go and create a whole heap of other problems by your solution. So I think the government just has to really think about what they're doing here and consult actual technical people who understand this area, because I feel like they're putting a solution in place which I'm not even necessarily sure they understand technically how it works. And I think they're going to end up creating more problems than what they think they're solving.
No, definitely. They're talking about facial scans. They're talking about biometric details, AIs doing age verification. This, I very much doubt they're even going to be able to implement this. I don't even think they've thought that far ahead.
I hope they don't, because the government's long history of being able to really protect people's data, to really set up these systems that can be defended.
Shocking.
I mean,
well, you're forcing Mark Zuckerberg to have your facial data.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole problem with this. It's not a question as much as, although I do think it's morally wrong to stop a 15-year-old from being able to watch a Joe Rogan podcast because you think that there could be somewhat other harm, right? I think it's ludicrous to be advocating for that. But you've got this situation where it's going to be Australians having to prove that they're not kids, and the mechanisms by which you do that are going to be in the hands of these people that you say are nefarious, the Mark Zuckerbergs. I don't understand how you can balance those two thoughts.
It's a very funny one in that both tech giants from Silicon Valley with checkered political histories are taking over the world, but also we want them to be able to have more data. Which one is it, guys?
Definitely. Well, let's move on. The ABC has been accused of a cover-up, and it involves one of their star employees, Miff Warhurst, Now, it was a cracker scoop by the Australian Steve Jackson, who reports a trivial suburban dispute over ABC personality Miff Warhurst's fence line has escalated into allegations the public broadcaster launched a one-sided journalistic hit job on her neighbour. The ABC has now been accused of breaching its own editorial guidelines and wasting thousands of taxpayer dollars after publishing a withering takedown of mother of three, Carla Martinez, on its website and social media last May, while, and this is important, failing to even disclose its star presenter, best known for her recurring role in the ABC's music comedy quiz show Spicks and Specs, that she was a central player in the vicious neighbourhood feud. Clearly a major conflict of interest, but in typical ABC fashion, they simply say everything is fine and they did nothing wrong. Caroline, love to get your reaction to this story. An absolutely cracker media story by Steve Jackson in The Australian. What do you make of it? Was it wrong of the ABC not to say that one of their own employees was involved?
Well, that little bit of footage that I saw, the behaviour looked a bit feral, so I probably wouldn't be claiming her as my own, to be perfectly honest. But look, this is a big miss, and it's something that if it happened on any other station in relation to any other employee, it would be front and centre on Media Watch. So, look, I hope it does crop up there because it is a big miss. Look, this is one of those things. It's always better to declare because the cover-up is always worse than whatever the original crime was to begin with. But, you know, this is why this show exists. This show exists because we talk about the ABC's editorial standards all the time, or the lack of adhering to them and whatever. And it just feels like it continues to be this beast with absolutely no accountability. But this here is 101 sort of stuff. It is a huge miss and it's an easy fix. Just don't do it again. Apologise and don't do it again.
Well, that's the main thing. And this is where I get frustrated with the ABC. It's the lack of apology and the lack of accountability. You get this kind of very aggressive and defensive comm strategy where you essentially have them saying, well, no, it's technically fine. And look, I don't even care what their editorial policies are. If you ask someone at the pub, should they have said that their own journo was a party to the story? Quite clearly, they should have. Why not just admit? Why not just say, yeah, that was an oversight, we should have put that in there?
Yeah, as Steve Jackson reports, the ABC put out the message saying, like, we're not admitting any fault, but we do notice that the article has been taken down. So then I just have the question of, okay, so why'd you take it down? Like, okay, fine, there was no fault, but why'd you take it down? And then the second part for me, one other thing. Miff Warhurst said, I never wanted this thing to come out in public. I never wanted this story to be reported. Could you imagine the sense of betrayal she would have felt?
Her own colleagues.
Organisation reported the story in a way that made her neighbour look so terrible and left her name out of it. I'm very sorry Miff Warhurst had to go through all that. That would have been very damaging.
But I believe it. I don't think there's any suggestion she was driving. No. I think her own colleagues have stitched her up.
Yeah, but still, like, even then, you know, as a journalist, there's a way to report it that brings Miff Warhurst into the story. You can report with her, you can get quotes from her, but you choose not to do it. And I just go, doesn't that feel like make you feel bad?
You'd have to kill the story if it was involving one of your own colleagues, right?
Yeah.
Surely you have to kill the story because there's a conflict of interest issue. And so the lack of, we'll leave it there. Moving on now, though, because Labor is moving to replace so-called Conservatives from the ABC board. James Madden from The Australian reports the federal government is expected to replace ABC Deputy Chair Georgie Somerset, appointed to the public broadcaster's directorship during the Turnbull era, with an outside pick in a move that could further dilute the Conservative presence on the board. Now, Caroline, this is really interesting because we like to say, well, not me, obviously, but some people like to say that the ABC is truly independent. If that was the case, then why are you trying to put your own people with your political persuasion on the ABC board? Could it be that perhaps the ABC is not truly independent and there is strategy behind putting someone who politically agrees with you on the board because it changes the editorial makeup?
It's not hard to join those dots, is it, Jack? And you know what I really love about your lead in there is the word so-called was doing so much heavy lifting there. No one in their right mind thinks that anyone who was appointed under the Turnbull era is a Conservative. So they might be a very wet moderate at most, which on the ABC board they probably think is, you know, far right, but it's actually not when you look at the landscape in totality. But it's very, very interesting the way that all of these names and categories and whatever get used. And as you said, exactly right. Everyone always seems to be trying to push someone in or push someone out, and this doesn't happen for no reason.
Yeah, well said. James, your thoughts?
I just go, like, it kind of gives the game away in the sense that we need the ABC to live up to its charter to be completely independent. But by the own admission of, oh, we've got Conservative board members and we've got left-leaning board members.
Yeah, he's probably a moderate as well.
Yeah, and a moderate, but you can't have independence because everyone has their bias, even at the upper levels. It's just the idea of there being a completely independent, objective ABC. It just cannot exist in reality.
Which is a huge problem when we're talking about like some of these issues that have stemmed from the board, conversations about coverage, when we're talking about people being influenced. It is an issue, and obviously you can't get around the fact that bias is almost inevitable, and you have to admit that, and that's a big problem. Anyway, James, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us.